All right, John, thank you for emailing me your swing videos. Hopefully we can help you get straightened out here. I think you said in your email that you were having a hard time or having trouble slicing the ball. And I can see in your setup and a few things in your swing at why that might be the ball flight. So I'm going to kind of point out a few things to you here. First of all, I want you to pay attention to the screen on the left, the down the line 6-iron view. And before we get into the swing mechanics, I just want to make sure that you understand what we call the ball flight laws, and that is the physics that sort of governs why the ball flies the way that it does. If you'll notice, I kind of drew a little line on your stance line there to just kind of represent where you're aiming, and I've also drawn a white line over the ball that would represent the target line. Envision a target straight away on that line. We know that the ball starts pretty much where the club face is pointed, and let's just say that we want to hit a draw. To hit a draw, the ball must start some amount to the right of the target. Therefore, the yellow line here, the yellow arrow, represents where the club face would want to be pointed at the moment of impact. Okay? So this point right there. Alright? If we return with a club face that was pointed some amount to the right, that ball would start predominantly in that direction. And if we want the ball to curve back to the left, the club path has to be more to the right, and that would be represented by the red arrow there. Again, the club path would have to be more to the right than the club face. That's what would give the ball, it would knock the ball off its spin axis to the left and give the ball the right to left curvature. You hinted in your email that you thought you were swinging to the left and kind of cutting across the ball, and you're exactly right. That's why you're seeing the ball slice. So I want, as we have the discussion about your swing here and how to move your body, I want you to keep this information about the ball flight laws kind of in the forefront of your mind. So A, we got to generate a club path to the right. That's the number one thing that has to happen in order to hit a draw. And number two, the face has got to be, gently pointed some amount to the right so that the ball can start to the right and curve back to the target. So let's get into talking about a little bit more about how to create that club path to the right. So there are some things in your setup that make it very difficult to swing the club to the right. And I'm going to start with your setup. If you look here on the right, I've drawn a circle sort of around your hands. And what I'm doing there is I'm highlighting your grip. Your right hand, you have what we call a strong left hand grip, which is fine, and you have what we call a weak right hand grip. And weak means that your right hand is very much up on top of the shaft. Okay? Anytime we anatomically have that right hand up on top of the shaft, it is going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to very much level out our spine. And if you're looking at the picture on the right, I'll kind of just draw an indication of, let's say that would probably represent your spine angle there. So your spine angle is very much up in that vertical. The other thing that it's going to do is it's going to cause the right shoulder to be normally a little higher than it normally is. Okay, the right shoulder at address should be lower than the left shoulder because the right hand is further down on the grip. Okay. And as the right shoulder gets lower, the spine should tilt gently away from the target. When you have that high right shoulder and that weak right hand up on top of the shaft, if you look over here on the left, it actually causes your shoulders to point gently to the left of the target line. So I would say your shoulders are probably pointing sort of in this direction here. And, one of the indicators that that's happening from a down the line view is if you look right here at your left arm, you can see a lot of your left arm, and I'll get this circle off the way so the view is clear. You can see a lot of your left arm behind your right arm there from this down the line perspective. You can see a lot of that glove, okay? To hit a draw and to create this path out to the right, I want those shoulders pointing some amount to the right of our target line, okay? I like to see our feet in a position, more like this. Feet, hips, and shoulders all pointing gently slightly to the right of the target. That's going to help create that rightward path, as you see here with the red arrow. Okay, so from a setup perspective, I'd like to see the spine tilting slightly more away from the target, and again, that would look something along the lines of this. That will naturally happen when you take your right hand off the top of the shaft and get it more on the side of the club. Okay, that's going to help the spine tilt slightly more to the right, and it's also going to keep your shoulders from pointing to the left of the target. Those are some quick things in the setup that we can do in order to help you swing a little bit more in to out. Okay. Now, as we kind of get into looking at the swing, I'm going to take all the stuff off of here. Let's just pay attention first to the swing on the right. Understanding and controlling how you shift your weight in the golf swing is one of the key determining factors of the three-dimensional travel of the club head. In other words, the direction of your club path. Okay. As you make a backswing here, I'd say your backswing looks pretty good. There are a few things, I could nitpick, but for the most part, it looks like you've kind of shifted your weight into your right side. I like that. Your left knee has sort of rotated slightly in toward the golf ball here. I like that. That's another indicator that, your pressure is moving into your right foot. But one of the common things I see amongst, higher handicap players and players who slice the ball is that they don't quite understand how the lower body should function in the golf swing. Okay, if you'll notice how your left knee sort of internally rotated there at the start of the backswing, well, when you start down, that left knee has to return. It has to re-rotate back out in front, and the pressure has to move quickly into your left foot. All right, the pelvis needs to move rapidly forward toward the target at the start of the downswing. Okay, and that gets us into that spine tilt type position that I talked about. Okay, I've got a tour player here on the left that's hitting a big high draw, and he's going to model a lot of the things that I just covered in your lesson, in the first part of your lesson. But I just kind of want you to watch how the pressure shifts to the right, and I want you to watch how fast and how quickly this left knee will re-rotate in this direction, and the center of his pelvis is going to move very much laterally in the downswing. All right, watch for both of those things. And the faster that this golfer can shift to the left and move his pressure back onto his lead foot, just like that, and I'll kind of stop you in the same position so you can do a little quick comparison. Okay, you're going to notice a couple of things. Number one, you're not as far forward, and number two, your wrists have started to unhinge much quicker than his. Okay, we'll get to that point in a second, but I want to start with the pressure shift and the hips moving forward, because this is the key ingredient to your golf swing, and this is sort of the engine or the heartbeat to the whole thing. Okay, so the more that the center of the golfer's pelvis, let's just call it the belt buckle right in there, the more that center moves forward in the downswing, the further to the right the golfer's swing path goes. And again, we talked about that at the beginning of your lesson. We want you swinging in to out or to the right so you can hit a little draw instead of swinging left across it. So this lateral movement that you see this tour player demonstrating here is a key ingredient to hitting a high draw. Okay, so I want you to notice how the left knee rotates out. I would say that right here his left knee is probably 1 to 2 inches and outside his left foot. So you can see considerably how he's loading into the ground, he's pushing forward, and he's getting ready to jump. Okay, I want you to watch how his belt line, if I kind of draw a line across his belt right now, I want you to watch how it raises through impact. He's pushing up and forward. Again, he's pushing up and forward. That's called extension. So he's extending his pelvis and he's extending his thorax, and he keeps pushing up and forward all the way to the finish. So you can see how his upper body kind of looks curved here. Okay, that curved type of finish, that's an indicator that the pelvis has pushed forward in this direction all the way into the follow through. All right. If we look at your swing, again, we talked about your wrist unhinged too quickly. Your pelvis doesn't push forward. Your weight never really gets onto your left side. You can see that you're kind of hanging back just a bit, and that club is traveling to the left. You know, there's a lot of pressure back here on this right foot right now, believe it or not. You know, this tour player over here is just basically using his right foot for balance, but you're actually pivoting on your right foot. And there's a lot of weight and pressure back there. We've got to get your hips way more forward. Feel like you're pushing your belt buckle toward the target. And that's got to start way back here in the downswing. Okay? So we can get your pressure forward. And again, I am only talking about your hips. And what I mean by that is it doesn't do us any good. I'm going to put a little line here on your head. Let's imagine that there's a brick wall right there. Okay? I want your hips to push forward, but I don't want your head to move through that wall. If the head stays stable and the hips move forward, that's going to create, let me clear all this off, what we call axis tilt. And that axis tilt is the tilt in the spine. You can see this tour player here at impact, his spine very much looks like this at that point. Versus, you know, yours is very much kind of straight up and down. Maybe a little bit of tilt there. But again, that's a very good visual of how much further forward you need to go with your pelvis. Okay, John, I know I'm covering a lot of ground here, and I usually don't like making videos this long, but there's one other piece I want to get to really quick. One more adjustment at the setup. If you take a look at your shaft angle here, okay, your hands are a little bit low. All right, the more that you have the handle down like this, the harder it's going to be. There's going to be a couple things. Number one, the club wants to travel more to the left, which is what we're trying to get out of. But number two, it puts the lead wrist or the left wrist into a little bit of extension, and we're going to try to get your lead wrist into a little bit more flexion as you swing the club, and I'll touch on that in a second. But basically, I like to see, you know, the shaft a little bit more here, so maybe a little less forward bend. And when I say forward bend, I'm just talking about how much you're bent over here. You know, a little less forward bend. Raise the handle up just a touch. You know, kind of like Adam Scott looks here on the left. So, you know, when I look at your backswing from this view, you know, you do a lot of really good things here. I'd say from this top of the backswing position, I mean, there's way more going on that's good than's bad. So I really like how this looks. Okay, what we're going to key on in this downswing is this lead wrist right here. What's going on with this lead wrist as that club comes down, okay? And how that lead wrist functions, okay? Because when you start down, we want the hand path to move out toward the ball like it's doing, but we want this shaft to sort of lay down. And you know what I mean by lay down is, you know, here's the shaft right now. We want that shaft to kind of lay down a little bit more, sort of right in this ballpark, okay? The biggest contributing factor to getting that shaft to lay down is the flexion of the lead wrist. And when I say flexing, I'm talking about simple terms, bowing, arching, all those things would be describing flexing the lead wrist. And when you flex that wrist is critical, and that's going to be at the change of direction up here. So as that club goes from backswing, as soon as it starts to stall and change direction, I want you to feel like you're twisting that handle a little bit, putting a little arch in that lead wrist. That's going to shallow the shaft. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to align the sweet spot of this club. Okay? It's going to align this club head. Oops, excuse me. It's going to get the sweet spot of the club slightly more inside the hands. Okay, your left wrist is an extension right now. It's not bowed and arched, and because of that, that club head's going to be on a trajectory where it travels outside of your hand, so that when it gets down here, it's going to be well outside the hands. If you take a look at that, you can see the club head's outside the hands. Where I'd want to see that club head to hit a nice little draw at this last parallel to the ground, I want to see the club head more in this ballpark. So, imagine that's the club face and the shaft is coming out like this. Okay, so the club head would be more inside your hands, much like Adam Scott over here. So if you'll notice, I'll take him to the top. Position looks pretty close to yours. Now watch how he bows and arches his lead wrist right here. You can see that thing arching and bowing. And you can really see it down here in this frame. And you can see where the club head is relative to his hands. Okay, that is setting the club up as he pivots to be on a trajectory. Club's moving out to the right of the target line like this. And because of that, you'll see the ball draw. You'll see this ball start to the right, boom, and you'll see this ball draw back to the flag, okay? So the only way to get that club swinging from in to out like that is, A, that left wrist has to arch and flex, and it starts way up here. It has to bow, arch, and flex all the way down, so the sweet spot is inside the hand path at this last parallel to the ground, okay? From here, we're not doing a whole lot with our hands. All we're really doing is pivoting our body. Okay? Go back and take a look at yours really quick. Again, the left wrist is fine here. It just needs to bow and arch, but it doesn't. It actually goes into extension, or it cups. From there, as soon as that left wrist cups, the golfer will no longer pivot, because if you pivot, you actually would slice the ball worse. You would actually swing more to the left. You have a face open relative to the path here. As soon as that face is open to the path, you will stall your pivot and just kind of flip your hands a bit. All right? And it's not too bad here. But we've got to line that sweet spot back up inside the hand path if we want to hit draws. All right, I know this video is a little bit on the long side, but hopefully I was able to cover most of the things that that we needed to touch on. And give me a call if you have any questions or need a further explanation. Hope you enjoy.